Hiya, Solopreneur Nation. This is an uncaffeinated, overhydrated, unshowered Bo Yoder coming to you live on the interwebs. Look, if you've got this thing, this vision for what the future should be, and have the guts it takes to venture outside the matrix of normal, safe, boring mediocrity to make it real, if you've ever been called a dreamer, crazy, or obsessed, if you've been told it's time to stop and be responsible and give up on your dreams, yet you know that what you're doing truly matters and it's your moral responsibility to make it happen, so that the world can move forward out of the darkness into the light that you're trying so hard to shine upon it, then welcome. My name's Bo Yoder, your Solopreneur Survival Guide. I'm here to help people just like us learn the best ways to survive your glorious, yet hectic period of catastrophic success so that your light sparkles bright in the darkness. Because you are not crazy. You are not lazy. You are a freaking genius who is exactly doing what you were born to do, which is why you are here today. You have amazing focus even though you don't know it, amazing self-discipline even though you don't believe it. It's just hidden away waiting for you to discover how to access it. And if you have the right structural tools, you can and must take this as fast and far as you can, because the world desperately needs you. This is episode 7, and today I'm going to talk about defining your power focus envelope. Now, this is kind of an interesting thing because it's different for different people. What will happen is you get into a state of flow, and you all know what that feels like. It feels awesome. You know, you're in that moment. Your ideas are cranking. You know, the word flow just describes it most clearly and best. You do your best work. You do it fast. You do it at a high level of quality, and it's effortless. It's not something you have to struggle with, like digging a ditch. It just comes out of you in a giant stream. In fact, like a fire hose, the real problem when you're in flow is controlling all that information and really guiding it and curating it so that it turns into something real that can actually be used. So each person has a different focus window. Some people who have been diagnosed ADD and have been sort of denigrated their whole life are actually fantastic entrepreneurs. But if they try to put themselves in other people's boxes, they underperform, they feel like failures, they don't get the job done. So what I want you to do now is very consciously, as you, and here, let me grab my 10-minute tirade timer to get this thing started. As you begin to go through your normal workflows, I want you to be conscious of time. I want you to just keep track of things. Get your phone and start a stopwatch. And I want you to sit down and do a task that is part of the creation process. That's something that you really have to focus a lot on. It's not just little mediocre things, checking an email, doing the sort of take out the garbage type work in your business. I'm talking about the thing that makes you better than everybody else, that only you can do, that you can't outsource, that you can't let somebody else deal with. I'm talking about creation. I'm talking about organization. I'm talking about process. When you get into one of those workflows, I want you to sit down, start your stopwatch, and I want you to notice two things. I want you to notice how long it takes you to get into that state of flow to where you just feel like everything's cranking. When you want to look to the person who's not next to you and high-five them because everything's just going so awesome, that's your flow state. I want you to note when that happens. That's a little bit of a muscle. You can get into flow better and faster, and there's some techniques for that. But I just want to find out where you are organically. Then I want you to keep on cranking. Hopefully you have a couple hours blocked out for this. Don't bother with this exercise unless you do. And I want you to be aware of when that flow begins to feel a little bit of friction. So in the beginning, you might kind of be lost. You're staring at a blank screen if you're writing. You don't quite know what you're going to be saying. And then it clicks. And you start flowing, and you're going, and you're going, and you're going. And then maybe a certain period of time, I don't want to put numbers in your head, but a certain period of time later, now you're starting to stumble over your words. Maybe some of your ideas aren't as clear as they were. And you start to now have to put effort and energy. It feels like a slog. It feels like you're doing work again. Take that moment. As soon as you realize that that's occurring, go back, look at your phone, look at your stopwatch, see where you are. Each person's going to have their own little window. Some people have a window that's 10, 15 minutes long. That's why I use these little 10-minute timers to help me time these podcasts. Some people, it's a half an hour. Some people, 45 minutes. The science out there shows that 90 minutes is sort of the outward limit. People just can't remain at that state of flow and be highly productive for more than 90 minutes. So it's going to be somewhere between in that zone. So for me, I find that I laugh, I call it the power hour. For me, an hour is a perfect amount of time. If I get going, usually the first 10 or 15 minutes aren't that productive. Then I really start to crank. My productivity peaks, in the half an hour to 45-minute mark. And then as I get into the 45 minutes to an hour, my productivity starts to slow down and I start to be less creative, and there's less sort of neural excitement that's producing at a high level. So how can you use that information to better serve you? Well, it's all about friction. It's about time compression and expansion. So for instance, writing is a great example. I'm going through the act of creation. I'm building something that never existed before, and I'm doing so in a structured manner. With these podcasts, I have some bullet points. Because I'm a stone cold expert, I don't have a script except for the opening, which I think is very important because it really states who I am, who I'm talking to, and why our time together is important. But after that, it's just me and my idea. So I have a bullet point, maybe 2 or 3 things that I want to cover on my way from the beginning of this 10-minute tirade to the end. After that, it's just flow. And sometimes, you get started and it doesn't flow and you stumble over your words and it sounds stupid and you start over again. But for me now, I've been putting myself into a state of flow for 30 years. And then for the last 10 years, I've really been focused on this aspect of my performance because my responsibilities, the demands on my time have grown exponentially. So I have to be able to take the time that I have in little chunks and make the most of it. Even if it's only 10 or 15 minutes, I got to be able to sit down, get into state, get into flow, bust out what I need to do high quality work, and then turn it off and go off and do the next thing. So what I find is, for writing, I have a fire hose of creativity. When I clearly delineate what it is I'm doing, I set my intention, what am I trying to do, what is my goal for this piece of writing, then I sit down, like I say, I struggle a little bit for the first 10 or 15 minutes, and then everything just kicks. I get the idea, it all crystallizes in my head, I can see the arc, I can see everything that I want to say, I just have to literally make my fingers put it down onto paper. Then I just go for the fire hose. I don't worry about grammar. I don't worry about spelling. I only worry about idea structure, clarity of communication, stories, and examples that are going to teach, if I'm teaching something, with the most clarity. And again, there are different modalities for teaching, so I try to hit people who are kinesthetic, visual, or auditory learners so that I'm offering this value to the whole world, not to just people who have the same brain state as I do. Then that's when I do my massive workload, right? That's when I get the most out of me. But the quality isn't necessarily that great. Now, for me, editing is very cerebral. That is more like mowing the lawn. It's like digging a ditch. It's not creative. It's not utilizing the flow state at all. It's very prescribed. It's like building a brick wall, one brick at a time. The bricks are heavy. You put the mortar in, you put the brick down, you pick up the heavy brick, you put the mortar down, you put the next brick. So I always look for the maximum amount of output without any agenda, without any quality concerns. And then at another period of time, or when I start to feel that friction kick in, then I go to a more structured workflow, which is editing. So I go back, I look at everything I wrote, I make sure it makes sense, I make sure that it's all logically laid out. Sometimes you'll have a great idea that pops in that's out of sequence, and I'll write it down. And clearly, I'll need to copy and paste, move that to a different place within the article or the chapter or whatever it is I'm writing. The editing piece is almost like, you'll hear me talk about this many, many times. It's almost the second self. It's a different part of my personality. It's a different part of my brain that's being accessed. So imagine that you are running a wind sprint. So you go out, you warm up, you get your muscles good, you run as hard and as fast as you can, and now your sprinting muscles are exhausted. Well, you really can't sprint at a high level anymore. You've used up that energy. But you could probably walk a few miles at a nice, slow, leisurely pace. So that's what the editing process is for me. So by almost gear shifting the way my mind works, I go in, I produce from nothing. I go through the creation process. Then I go back and I build the bricks. I do the lower cognitive function work of cleaning up what I've written, making sure it's properly ordered, making sure the grammar and the punctuation are correct, so that I then have a finished piece. And I've worked with other editors. I find I like to edit my own stuff because of the way that I work. So fire hose and then clean it up. It's almost like if you've watched a painter sometimes, they just start with a blank canvas and they put big smooshes of color everywhere, kind of defining the landscape, defining the areas. Then they start bringing in the details. So what my challenge for you this week is to spend some time really defining your envelope. And this is not something you do just once. I want you to do this exercise with the stopwatch over and over again until you find this zone. Like I say, for me, it's about 10 minutes in until about 45 or 50 minutes out. That's kind of my sweet spot. For you, it may be different. Maybe you really only can brainstorm and be creative for 10 or 15 minutes at a time. Fine. Absolutely fine. The real kicker here is to realize how your brain works, where your friction points begin, and to stop worrying about brainstorming and being creative when you've hit your friction point, because you're not going to do good work. You're going to feel crap about what you've created. You're going to feel stupid and foolish most of the time, and it allows all that negative self-talk to come back that makes you think about failure and that you're not good enough and that it really isn't working out the way you would like. Instead, if you can wind sprint, let's say it's just 10 minutes, do your brainstorming for 10 minutes, and when you start to feel that friction kick in, if you're 10, 12, 15 minutes in, stop. Move to another task, one that's more detail-oriented, one that's less creatively focused. Let that creative brain, that creative muscle reset, go back, do another 10 minutes. You'd be amazed at how by sort of multiplexing, multitasking in that way, where you're really not multitasking, you're microtasking. You're working on one thing for 10 minutes with total focus. Then you go and you work in a different way for 10 minutes in total focus. Then maybe it's time to get up and move around because you've been sitting you've been tight and really focused in on a screen for a long period of time. Being able to rotate through that, depending on your individual focus and power envelope, whether it's a power hour, power 15 minutes, power 45 minutes, power half hour, you're going to find that as a very individual thing to each person, the way that your brain state is put together. And maybe you can do 2 hours. Maybe you are better at it than I am. But once you find that envelope, stop fighting with yourself once you hit the friction point. Instead, move to a different task that's more prescribed, more task-oriented, more checklist-oriented. You'll give that cognitive, that neural net creation brain a moment to rest. Then you can come back and probably start another power hour and be that much more productive during the day. So this is why you hear writers and creatives talk about how they struggled for 6 months and then wrote the whole album in a weekend, right? Because they didn't have this structure. They didn't understand how to turn that brain on, give it the gas, let it go. Instead, they tried to struggle. They tried to fight. And the brain has this strange exponential friction. It's almost like, for those of you who know boating, hull speed. So when you bring a boat up to a certain level of speed called hull speed, it then takes exponentially more power to go faster. There's more friction. There's more. It takes more energy. Same thing in your brain. So don't hit your hull speed. Learn where that hull speed is. Learn where your cruising speed is. Get in there. Be super productive. Let the fire hose shoot forth all of your creativity. And then once you start to hit the friction point, stop. Don't be blameful. Don't feel like you're weak, that you can't do this for more than 10 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. It's the creation process. You can trigger it. You've used up your gas. Now it's time to go do some other boring, mundane tasks. Let that gas tank rebuild. Go back, be creative again. You can cycle this many times during the day and you'll get unbelievable amounts of work done. All right. So pretty awesome stuff there. Definitely play with it. Love to hear your comments and to see how this has worked for you. For the show notes, links, and resources for this episode, please visit ssg.guide/SSG7 because this is episode 7. And for some free training, you can always visit training.ssg.guide. So remember, this is just the way your brain works. You're now into a new world where you're programming your own NI, your natural intelligence. And you're not lazy. You're not crazy. You are a freaking genius. It's just hidden away. You're doing exactly what you were born to do. And you have amazing focus, even though you don't believe it. Amazing self-discipline, even though that you're not accessing it. It's just there, waiting for you to discover it. And if you have the right structure, such as some of the things we talked about today, and again, if you want to reach out and set up an appointment, we can go really deep on some of this stuff, because you need to know this. You can and must implement this in order to take your business as fast and as far as you possibly can, because the world desperately needs you. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.